Hello there, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal Sibelius cycle. And I'm doing this a little differently. I'm not going to sit here with like a stack of Sibelius cycles and go through them, fun as that may be, and I'm going to do that eventually. No. This is a different approach. This is my ideal Sibelius cycle. That is, I've pulled it together from all of my favorite performances of all of the various symphonies, and this is what I think is an absolutely perfect Sibelius cycle with no weak links. Now, of course, you may disagree. The only rule I followed is that no artist gets repeated. I wanted each of these pieces to be drawn from a different series of performances by different artists and orchestras, because I think that best displays the range of interpretive options for these pieces. I mean, I have sort of a didactic purpose in mind as well as just, finding the best performances of everything. And the truth of the matter is, I could do one with totally different performances, because I think, as some of you may know, even though I am more than happy to tell you what the best of anything is, at least in my opinion, there are usually a group of best performances, several best performances, and you can pick from any of them and be extremely, extremely happy. And that's what I've done with this Sibelius cycle. Now, what that means, of course, is that my ideal Sibelius cycle may not be your ideal Sibelius cycle. Of course, it's going to be better than your ideal Sibelius cycle, but those of you who are operating on a lower level of Sibelian awareness are more than welcome to comment and contribute your own ideal Sibelius cycle. I mean, that's what makes this so much fun, isn't it? I mean, really, let's face it. And I think that as a result, we're going to get some very interesting conversation in the comments. But what I insist that you do is follow the same rules I did. That is, you cannot repeat an artist. Now, as I go on and do these ideal lists, and I'm going to do a lot of them, we're going to go through all the major composers who wrote concertos and symphonies. We're going to do this over time. Sometimes the rules may change. It depends on the composer. I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. But with Sibelius, it's really possible to create a fantastic Sibelius symphony cycle without repeats. And so here we go. Are you ready? This is going to be so much fun. First of all, what you need to know is that Sibelius wrote 9 symphonies. So if you're going to comment, I need to see 9 symphonies. What are the other 2? Well, they're not numbered. It's Kullervo, obviously, is the first symphony, and then Lemminkainen, the Lemminkainen symphony, which we also need to talk about. And I really think, the Lemminkainen symphony, because the 4 tone poems that make it up were separated and it was never performed as a cycle, after perhaps the initial premiere or whatever it was. I don't remember what the exact circumstances were. But Sibelius, of course, sanctioned performances of all the parts separately and didn't revise 2 of them. So, it's really just a shame, because it really is a symphony. It's as much a symphony as any of the other sort of 4 tone poem-y symphonies that are out there. I mean, the big example being Tchaikovsky's Manfred Symphony, or also Berlioz's Harold in Italy. All of these have individual scenic tone poems that create 4-movement symphonies. And if your criterion for a symphony being a symphony is that one of the movements has to be essentially in classical sonata form, then Lemminkainen absolutely fills the bill, because the first movement, Lemminkainen and the Maidens of Sari, has a slow introduction, and then it's in absolutely textbook sonata form with a first subject, a second subject, a development section, a wonderful recapitulation of the first subject. It's an ideal sonata form movement, and the finale, Lemminkainen's Return, is basically a rondo, or a rondo-like thing. There's absolutely nothing that disqualifies this piece from being a symphony. Nothing. And that's what it is. And frankly, I believe that's how it should be considered. And so if you add those 2 pieces in, we see that Sibelius wrote 9 symphonies. And the only reason he didn't really call them that, in my view, is that being where he was in Finland and being who he was very, very careful about what he designated as a symphony, and he made sure that when he started writing symphonies that they fit the accepted, more conservative and traditional definition of what a symphony should be. But remember, he began as a composer in a much more progressive mentality and frame of mind. And so, that's why his symphonies are kind of mixed up. And the other issue about putting together a great Sibelius cycle, and the problem we'll have when we talk about all the cycles of the big stack, which will be coming eventually, is that the first 2 symphonies are so different from the next batch, from the rest of them, the remaining 5. The first 2 show Sibelius in his earlier romantic Tchaikovsky and Lisztian phase. The second symphony is in some ways transitional, but by the third symphony, he'd reached an absolutely personal brand of Sibelian neoclassicism, and each work is as individual as could possibly be. And so finding cycles which are able to deal with the entire compositional range of what he did is not easy. It's almost like Mahler cycles. There are no perfect ones out there. There's some very great ones, but there are always some that have something that's a little weaker or something that somebody doesn't get. But not here, not with my selection. In my selection, every single symphony is absolutely fabulous, and it makes a great cycle. Of course, acquiring it and what you're going to do about that, I'm not worrying about that. I'm sorry. This is an idealistic talk. So let's get going. First, Kullervo, Berglund. You've got to have Berglund and Bournemouth. I mean, because Berglund did Kullervo a couple times, but the first one with the Bournemouth Symphony, we've talked about it before. I've talked about it in the Kullervo talk. It wasn't my final choice, mind you, but it was one of them. And it's one of the most important. It was the premiere recording of the work. It still has a freshness, an authenticity, a sense of discovery, a wonderful, rugged, raw, primal quality that the music really, really has to have, and it's a superb performance. So, number 1 for symphony number -2 or 0 or whatever we do with Bruckner, let's call it, is Berglund with Bournemouth on Warner. Next, we come to Lemminkainen. We all love Lemminkainen. Now, the Lemminkainen tone poems, really, I think what broke the symphony up was the second or third movement, because like Mahler's Sixth, there's some question as to about what order the 2 inner movements go in, and it can go either way, but it doesn't make any difference. As with Mahler's, actually not with Mahler's Sixth. With Mahler's Sixth, it does make a difference. The scherzo has to be second. But with Lemminkainen, you can either have the Swan of Tuonela second or third. But the real problematic piece is Lemminkainen in Tuonela, which is Hades, the place of the dead, because it's musically the weakest of the 4. I think that's probably the case. It is a scherzo and trio, in case you're wondering. It really has A form. I mean, this is a symphony, guys. It's really a symphony. And it's kind of amazing that way. But, the outer sections have a lot of sort of skirling string figurations and tremolos, which can sound marvelous if you realize the thematic substance of the music, if it's played that way. And recently, performances have begun to dig into this particular section and make wonderful music out of it. And no one does it better, in addition to the rest of the work, than Leif Segerstam on Ondine. Oh, this is hot. This is wonderful. This is terrific. It's gorgeously recorded. It's fabulously played. It comes with an absolutely splendid tapiola, and I can't recommend it highly enough if you're looking for a Lemminkainen or Sibelius's real Symphony number 2 or Symphony number -1 or whatever you want to call it. It's the one that comes after Kullervo and before the actual first symphony. So that is where you should go for Lemminkainen. Now we get to the first symphony, the official Symphony number 1. And here, the one that I absolutely recommend as highly as possible is Leonard Bernstein with the New York Philharmonic. Bernstein, of course, is a marvelous Sibelian. He always was. But what makes this performance so great is that it really captures that mixture of something new and Sibelius's Tchaikovskyan roots, which of course he recognized. Now Sibelius did this symphony twice. He re-recorded it in Vienna for Deutsche Grammophon, a performance of I saw live in Carnegie Hall, which sounded marvelous, but the recording is not as good because it's I don't know, it's recorded in a very, very dry acoustic. It sounds rather unpleasant. The tempi are quite slow. It's very grand, but his first with the New York Phil, that freshness again of a new discovery, of a new composer feeling his oats. That's what you get in this performance, this Bernstein performance. Now, number 2 is going to surprise no one. It has to be, it's one of either two versions. It's either Barbaroli with the Royal Philharmonic, which was on Chesky, but you can't find it so easily anymore, or Szell. Szell is the guy. We know Szell is the guy. This is a French Columbia. This is the Tokyo recording, the one he did live in Tokyo just before he died, that is about the most amazing thing anybody ever did anywhere. But if you can only find the one with the Concertgebouw and Phillips, you're going to do just as well. Szell was absolutely unmatched in Symphony No. 2. I mean, there are great twos out there, but considering that it's Sibelius' most popular symphony and it's been recorded a million times, it's been done very badly so frequently, and particularly now, the modern sort of crew of Sibelius conductors, they are so alienated from that romantic, heroic sort of ethos that this symphony, celebrates, and they play it so badly and so boringly. It's just awful. So Szell is the way to go. By God, it's exciting and perfectly played and perfectly paced, and it's amazing. Now, Symphony No. 3. One of the reasons I'm excited about doing this way, is that I'm going to get to talk about some of the individual works that I haven't done individual talks on, or symphony cycles, and I can give them a little more attention before I may do a talk on the individual work. Again, with a stack, we'll go through it and do all that stuff. But right now, I don't want to wait any longer. I want to tell you what the great ones are so that you know. Number 3, my choice, Gibson. Gibson and the Scottish National Orchestra, the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, on Chandos. Now, there are other great thirds. The third is actually done pretty well by almost everyone who does it, because basically it's only done by people who are doing complete cycles, and they love Sibelius and they know Sibelius, and so they basically do it right. But the third is probably Sibelius's least popular symphony. It doesn't deserve to be. It's such a great work, but it's a deliberately classical, smaller scale, less heroic piece of music. It's amazing in a lot of respects. I talk about it in my book on Sibelius symphonies, which of course I recommend that you have a look at if you want to get to the essence of the Third Symphony. But this performance, Gibson was a great, great Sibelian. I mean, he really was. And there are many, many beautiful moments in his Sibelius cycle, but none better than the third, because it has that sort of wonderful forward wind balance and magnificent horn playing, which you really need in the finale. When they're going da 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 da. It's just done so beautifully, and it's so wonderfully paced and inevitable and organic. And I have to say about how the symphony is a not popular piece. I was once invited to spend a weekend in the Hamptons in Long Island, a place which I will generally do anything to avoid going to, especially in the summer, because all of the horrible people in New York go to the Hamptons on the weekend. So if you stay in New York on the weekends, you can avoid all the horrible people because they're all out in their pretentious, overpriced houses in the Hamptons. But anyway, it was an invitation. It was kind of a business thing, so I had to go as a client, and I was in banking then, and so I went, right? And I appointed myself the cook, and I made a big pot of chicken cacciatore. And while I was cooking the chicken cacciatore, I brought music. I always bring music. And, these are people who had no clue about classical music and weren't interested in it at all. And I brought this Sibelius third, and I plonked it on the stereo and just let it go. And wow, what an impression it made. Everybody wanted to know what it was. They all loved it. They thought it was fabulous. It's beautifully recorded too. They had a good sound system. It just sounded fantastic, especially the finale. And it just goes to show that if you listen without preconceptions, then the music makes an immediate effect. It really does. And the third is great. And Gibson's recording is as good as it gets. Now, Symphony number 4. Oh, we have so many choices for Symphony number 4, but I picked Maazel with the Vienna Philharmonic, his first Sibelius cycle. This is great, first of all, because it's Sibelius' gnarliest symphony, which is sort of works well with a conductor like Maazel. It was kind of weird himself, you know what I mean? He had his oddities, but there isn't anything he can do to this music, basically, that isn't going to be weirder than what it already is. So that's fine. And second of all, it's because it's the Vienna Philharmonic, which has a wonderful, wonderful characteristic sound that fits this piece for some reason. You know, the grinding double basses at the opening when they're going, you know, that, oh God, it's wonderful. And, you know, the horns, and it's just a fabulous, fabulous performance. The other fourths that I might have considered included Ormandy's RCA Fourth, which is fabulous and nobody notices or pays attention to. That's a great record. Or the Segerstam, again, but I'm not repeating anything. So Segerstam's Fourth is probably the best modern recording on Undine. But for my ideal Sibelius cycle, Maazel and the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, number 5. Number 5 has been done again a million times. There are some fabulous performances out there, but my selection is Colin Davis with the Boston Symphony. Boston. None of Colin Davis's later Sibelius is any good in the Fifth Symphony. This one was fabulous. First of all, the pacing is superb, especially in the first movement. You know, there's this, originally, as some of you may know, the symphony had 4 movements, but Sibelius revised it and jammed the first 2 together with a marvelous transitional passage, which is a gradual accelerando from the slow tempo of the opening to the quicker tempo of what was originally a scherzo, and Davis handles that perfectly. He's got the Boston Symphony, which sounds marvelous. I particularly like the snarly, kind of dirty sound that the trumpets have in their lower register in the coda of the first movement. And in that coda, what makes that piece is the timpani playing of Vic Firth. Everett Firth, Vic Firth, who of course created a musical equipment stick and drum empire, is one of the greatest timpanists, if not the greatest timpanist of the 20th century. And his playing in that coda of the first movement, it's one of the only performances where you actually hear it the way Sibelius wrote, and it's a bear of a part. It's wonderful. Wonderful. It's double rolls, you know, and you hear it, and it sounds marvelous. Same thing with the finale, where Davis actually gets the string section to breathe life into all of those tremolos. You know, orchestras hate the Fifth Symphony, the string sections, because it's nothing but tremolos, endless tremolos. All of the thematic material goes to the woodwinds or the brass, and the strings are just going chugga 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 for 32 minutes, basically. It's really, really miserable if you're a violinist, and you've got to get the orchestra to stay awake, because those tremolos have to have a million different qualities and colors and characteristics, and it's not easy. But here you have it. Davis and the Boston Symphony and Sibelius's Fifth. It doesn't get any better. And now we come to the Sixth. Now the Sixth, like the Third, is a problem child in Sibelius symphonies. Oh, it's so difficult. First of all, it has some of the most unsatisfying endings that Sibelius ever wrote, particularly the first movement, where he clearly doesn't know how to stop and finally kind of gives up in the end. And then, of course, it ends quietly at the end of the finale. And some really famous Sibelians have blown the Sixth, or not been optimal. I say blow it. Well, you know, they don't blow it. Someone like Berglund, he doesn't blow it, but the finale is marked Allegro molto, and no one ever plays it Allegro molto. I mean, it's usually, I don't know. And one of the things that the only people who play that final apotheosis the string thing, that beautiful theme. Dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 ba. Bernstein is one of the best ever. Unfortunately, the string playing isn't as great as it needs to be in that performance. And that's what happens with these symphonies, especially as you get to later Sibelius. He demands so much polish, especially from the strings, and he very seldom gets it. But there is a performance of the Sixth that absolutely blew me away, and this is really going to shock you. I absolutely guarantee it. Järvi with Gothenburg. I know you wouldn't think it originally. I mean, I could have chosen, for example, Karajan's Berlin one on DG, which is and gorgeous in terms of the string playing and beautifully paced and shaped. But this one, I don't know what it was. When I heard it, first of all, it's got a great coupling, Peleus and Melisande, which works perfectly with the Sixth for some reason. But, this is a performance that just has that organic, natural, effortless quality that virtually every other performance fails to capture. It's really extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, especially when you consider how tricky the piece is. And Järvi, who is not, the most thoughtful of all of the guys out there, right? I mean, he tends to be somebody who we think is kind of rough and ready and not very sensitive. But this performance with the Gothenburg Symphony is just glorious. It's so inevitable and so right sounding that I don't know. I could pick others that I think are excellent in their way, but I don't think anything captures the symphony quite as well as Niemi Järvi with the Gothenburg Symphony on BIS, and it's available separately. And let me tell you, you don't know the Sixth until you've heard this performance. It's just perfectly done. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Finally, we come to the Seventh, the Seventh. Many good sevenths out there. It's in one movement. It needs to have that sort of organic cohesion, and again, that sense of inevitability. But unlike the Sixth, where that organic cohesion is a quality that needs to overcome the somewhat fragmentary four-movement shape of the piece, the Seventh is all in one big arch, which is wonderful, so it keeps going. And the perfect guy for that kind of holistic conception of the music is Blomstedt. Blomstedt in San Francisco. I mean, just a performance that goes in one breath. Absolutely wonderful. I might have picked a Berglund. Also, interestingly enough, Bernstein, who does a great seventh. He learned it from Kusevitsky, is terrific. Maazel is also terrific. But in keeping with our rule that I'm not going to repeat an artist, I think Herbert Blomstedt and the San Francisco Symphony is as good as it's going to get in the Seventh. And that, my friends, is the ideal Sibelius cycle for all nine Sibelius symphonies. Now, I wait for you to weigh in with your own 9 and be smart about it, folks. There are many, 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 many choices, and I know that you're going to come up with some good ones, and I'm very, very curious to see what you have to say about it. So thank you all for listening. I hope this has given you a sort of Sibelius mini course. It'll help you jumpstart your collections if you don't know Sibelius that well. If you do, maybe you can supplement what you have by a couple unexpected choices. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you, and take care.